Welcome to Face to Face. This is a show about change and what's next. It's a show that asks questions and peels back the layers of our average everyday experience and goes beyond scratching the surface. We interview people doing incredible things who are making a difference around the globe. Join me as we listen in and get one step closer to understanding that big ideas shared create collaboration. Collaboration can inspire community, and communities create social change. I'm David Peck, and this is Face to Face. So my next interview is with Karen Wucke and Andrea Constant, and we talk about their compelling, important, and disturbing new film, The Case Against Cosby. And before we step in case you missed it, or you haven't missed it yet, maybe you've already seen the film, but survivors.org, hopehealing.ca, two websites you're going to want to write down and maybe look into on a bit more of a detailed level. So the line that really stood out for me in the film, there's so many things, but the essence of trauma is that you're alone. And that's kind of what we push back against, I suppose, not only in the conversation in this interview, but it also Karen Wucke, the filmmaker and producer and director and so on, storyteller, does with this film, The Case Against Cosby. You can see it on CBC Gem, and I believe it's going to be coming soon to a digital theater near you. Andrea and Karen and I talk about a sense of purpose. We talk about this notion of not being silent anymore, and how there's this sense of service and duty. And what's so remarkable about this is that Andrea, I think Andrea really believes that this is a victory for all survivors. And so we talk a great deal about hope and about how to be positive. It's about finding a community that you're comfortable with, that you feel safe enough in, that where you can speak out. And this is really, it is about trust. And so we touch on aha moments, and I learned a ton in this interview. And one of the things, victims who have been traumatized, who have been assaulted by friends and family, tend to not come forward. That was big news and new news, I think, for certainly for me and for other listeners. We talk a lot about faith and believing and shame and guilt and mind, body, spirit, authenticity, and how to sort of take command, and how that healing really is ultimately available. And this is an important, I think, important interview, important conversation. I wish we could have gone on longer, but it really is a film that you need to see. The Case Against Cosby, it's on CBC Gem, and stay tuned for it coming to a streaming platform somewhere near you, and where you can access it easily. And again, those websites are survivors.org and hopehealing.ca. Don't forget davidpecklive.com for more information about my writing and my speaking, and of course about my podcasting, face-to-face-live.ca. They're all kind of under one umbrella now. We're about to cross 600 interviews, which I'm pretty excited about. Stay tuned for some new information and more information coming up about my podcasting this year in 2023. And by the way, Happy New Year. And if you are listening, please sign up wherever you listen to podcasts, subscribe, give us a thumbs up on YouTube, like the channel, and please leave us a review. We would so appreciate it on Spotify or iTunes or wherever you listen, and then socially mediate the heck out of us. That would be brilliant for so many reasons. The film is The Case Against Cosby. The conversation is with Karen Wucke and Andrea Constant, coming right up. My name is David Peck, and you're listening to Face to Face. Well, welcome to Face to Face. We are joined by two very special guests here with us today on the show, and we are about to step into a conversation about some pretty important things, pretty important time in history. I guess you could say a historical kind of game changer, I suppose, in so many respects. We have Karen Wucke. She is a filmmaker, a storyteller, editor, producer, and she's here with Andrea Constant here today to talk about their new film, important new film, The Case Against Cosby. Thank you both for joining me on Face to Face today.
Our pleasure. Thank you for having us.
So, I mean, it's. I don't know in a way where to start, Andrea, but I think I need to start with you and the film. And I hope you're okay with this, Karen. I don't think I'm going to call this a spoiler alert, but there's a sense in the film. And by the way, congratulations on getting this story out. It's a marvelous film. It's a story that everyone needs to hear about, and we need to peel those layers back and go deeper. So thank you.
Thank you. You're very welcome.
Andrea, so there's I get a sense that that there's a sense of hope there, that sort of uh, you're deeply connected to. We open up the film with you carving a walking stick. We end with a walking stick. Is that kind of what gets you out of bed in the morning, or is there something else?
Well, I think it's probably just us having a sense of purpose. You know, the walking sticks certainly don't get me out of bed in the morning because I have so much more work to do other than the walking sticks. But
Sure.
no, I think it's just a sense of like, carrying the work forward. Having my foundation to support resources, support survivors and get resources for survivors.
Has there been a sense for you all along, and maybe part of the reason why you wanted to get this story on film, that you have been doing this for others as well, a voice for others who can't speak up at this point in time in their journeys?
Yeah, I think it's important to just not be silent anymore. For me, my pathway to healing was really knowing how important it was to come out of silence and to actually begin a path to healing. And it just, unfortunately, a path to healing does not include silence.
Interestingly, my last interview was with Sarah Polley. I was just so thrilled to get her on the show, and we had a very short.
Love Sarah Polley.
Oh yeah, big fan. We had all of about 9 minutes together about her new film, Women Talking. And Karen, I'd love to hear both of you on this. But as a storyteller, I mean, is this why you got in the first place? Was it about asking questions? Was it about going deeper? So Sarah talks about that. She talks about. I guess peeling back those layers and this is a narrative. It's a story. It's a story we need to tell, but it's so much more than that.
Interesting that you mentioned Sarah Polley, because I went to see her film at the film festival, and we were editing this film. So I'd spent the year with Andrea making this film, and I was heaving. I didn't know how anyone wasn't rolling in the aisles, heaving from the enormity of the truth that she revealed in that film. It was so beautifully crafted. And yes, this film is Andrea's story, and it's extraordinary, but it's every woman's story, and it's every predator's story. And when we started out, there were 3 pillars that I really wanted to hit. One was Andrea's story, the legal story, which is massive and could have, been 4 episodes. There was the reveal of a predator's mind and how they work, and understanding who they are and how they operate. And then the third was leaving people with a sense of hope and finding, we interviewed a lot of the Cosby survivors to find the group that would come together and do the work so bravely, so that people could witness how this affects a person, everyone who loves them, and the collateral damage that's done, so that they could understand why people just don't get over these things. You don't just step away from this. And that was the really the goals in the beginning, and I that I wanted to achieve, because otherwise it would be just a crime doc.
Right. Kind of,
right.
What's the next little piece of information? What's the next reveal?
Yeah, and it was a massive legal story. So the legal story alone was so huge, but really was only relevant. And probably halfway through the film, I realized once I'd pre-interviewed Ann Burgess and Anna Salter, who have interviewed more predators among them than anyone on the planet. In fact, Mindhunter was created after Anna Burgess, and she taught the FBI how to profile. How little we know about how predators work. And after that, I realized that was a main focus, that, like the trial, in the second trial, they brought in someone like them. Her name was Barbara Ziv, I believe. And she informed the jury so that when the women took the stand, they understood. And that was kind of what we were doing with an audience. We were informing an audience about trauma, so that when you watch the women's stories, you now understand them in a whole new context and can relate.
And can relate, absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, isn't that what this is all about, in a sense? Telling a story, having a
Yeah.
conversation about creating empathy. I mean, if there's a takeaway for me as a podcaster, it's that someone can listen to Andrea's story, your story, Karen, and walk away going, oh, well, it's not just me then. You know, there are
Right.
other people out there who are struggling through these things as well. And I know that's been it's been a major factor in my life, I hope, with respect to my own healing and so on, and just that idea of stepping in to a conversation. Andrea, how did you step in order to step out? And it maybe sounds clever or something, that question, and I really don't mean it to be, but where did you find that strength? I get the sense it was from the community around you, but I'd love to hear more from you on that.
Well, my uncle was a great inspiration in my life as a youngster. He was a war hero, and his sense of service and duty and being selfless, that was important for me. It was really about my faith and my belief my belief in a system that really wasn't set up to support me in any way. Or
Andrea's satellite gives out sometimes.
It's there. We just lost you there for a quick second, Andrea. Apparently the satellite is just repositioning.
Yeah. So, for me, it's just my uncle, and having faith and belief in even just something that I really didn't have a chance of winning in that court, but I just held the faith and held the belief. And that really just comes from my background, from my family, from admiring my uncle's journey. And yeah.
It's probably important. It was an important piece to tell you that at the end of the film, once we were finished, Andrea told me only then that when she began this journey, she was told by all the lawyers that there is a 2% chance of getting your perpetrator, finding justice with a perpetrator. Wow. 2%. That is what she was up against, and that's what every woman is up against.
2%.
The other thing that's important is that every survivor I interviewed, when we were talking to them to choose the ones that were going to come together, everyone to a woman believed they were alone, including Andrea. So
one of the things that struck me was, and I haven't read Gabor Mate, but I actually purchased his book very recently before the interview, not really even knowing he was in the film. Oh yeah, and his the Myth of Normal, I believe it is. But so glad you made that a part of the film and a part of this story. But doesn't he say that the essence of trauma is that you feel like you're alone?
Yes.
Yeah, and Andrea, yes. So your uncle was there. At what point do you say, okay, I'm being embraced enough, I'm feeling supported enough to step out? And you know what? Let me just take a moment. Survivors.org and hopehealing.ca, I believe, are the two websites where people who have suffered trauma and sexual trauma can go to for more information. Did I get those right?
Yeah, you did. Survivors.org and hopehealing.ca. But, I mentioned my great uncle, but also there were so many women that came forward. And to me, that was the wind beneath my wings, that I wasn't alone. And that's why I could fight for them. Yeah.
So you've talked a little bit about faith in the film. I think you say the direct quote is, I believe and have faith that it will be better.
Yeah.
I mean, I can't think of a greater tagline for the film, the T-shirt, the bumper sticker campaign, right? Isn't that all of us in a sense? Don't we all have to get, no matter what kind of situation we find ourselves in? But I mean, we're talking about a very particular kind of trauma here. But I'd love to hear a little bit more from you on that, because that's not an easy position to take.
Well, what do you have if you don't have hope? Right? Ultimately, what do you have if you don't have hope? You've got to have hope. We all going to have our challenges, and we need to just wake up every day and just be positive. There's going to be moments where, we might have a negative thought or a negative feeling, but I think, you just have to stay positive. And for me, it's just about knowing that I might not have a good day one day, but in the back of my mind, I'm saying tomorrow's going to be better. And that's really just a mind frame. Just, it can be so bad, it can be so horrible, but it'll get better.
Were there people along the way?
That was the whole purpose of,
Yeah,
Sorry,
go
I
ahead,
was going to
Karen.
say that was the whole purpose of the retreat, was
Right.
because I felt if people could be left with hope, um, it would make it much easier to understand, to embrace, to think about speaking out in their own lives, to look at their own lives differently. And that's important because when not only do people feel alone, but they feel like no one's going to believe them. And in often fact, they don't. No one's going to support them. Many times they don't. And those factors are the backbone of healing, is finding a community that supports you and speaking out. Andrea has it tattooed on her body. Tell someone. Secrets keep people sick. Secrets keep families sick.
Mm.
Secrets keep cultures sick. And the whole purpose is to step out of, you may feel alone now, but you're going to find, and I remember back, Andrea, I don't think we've ever said this, but I remember back when this was going on, and you told me the story of when you first went to the lawyers, thinking she was alone in the world and it had never happened to anyone else. And her lawyer would tell her, every week, Andrea, there's another woman. Andrea,
Mm.
someone else has come forward. Andrea, there's 5 more women. And that reveal and that information is like a lifeline for a survivor.
Yeah, I would imagine the idea that, I mean, isn't that kind of what a good friend is too? When you meet somebody for the
Yeah.
first time at a party, don't you sort of go, "Oh, you love the same things that I do, or you've
Yeah.
experienced the thing, right?" You kind of like, "Wow,
Yeah.
somebody I can hang out with, somebody I can share a bottle of wine with, or whatever the case might be." Um, so the community, I was really struck by the moment in the film where Gabor was getting closer. Was it to you, Andrea? And moving
It was
in, and
Donna.
yeah, and
Donna.
Donna.
invading your personal
Mhm.
space. Andrea, did you, Karen, Andrea, either of you, did you feel like maybe at some points, oh, maybe this wasn't such a great idea after all, doing the circle and filming it? Because I would imagine that probably
Yeah.
changed the tone a little bit, or was it green light all the way?
It's uncomfortable to watch
Yes, it's
because we
hard.
all experience it, but I had done work with Gabor. I know how he works.
Got
I've
it.
experienced the power of his. I trust him
There you
100%.
go.
And it was uncomfortable to watch as it was happening, and uncomfortable to watch on film. But haven't we all experienced that? Isn't it a aha moment? Like, the whole purpose of that was retreat is if there could be a handful of aha moments where we
Mm.
get something about our own lives in a new way, then it's worth being uncomfortable for.
Yeah, and I mean, just to kind of, yeah, and it was Donna that happened to, but we were all there supporting her. I mean, because we were in that healing circle, we all were experiencing everything as live as people were going through it. It was very intense.
One of the things that really struck me to, I guess you could say, would be one of my takeaways from the film, was that if a friend or a family member is the perpetrator, it's so much more difficult to come forward. It makes perfect sense. It totally makes
Mhm.
perfect sense for so many reasons. Now, is that a part of why 2% chance of getting a conviction? I mean, is that a part of what we're talking about here, a broken system, et cetera? Or is that something else going on there?
Well, Anna Salter said it so well in the film. She basically said, victims don't behave the way we expect them to behave if they know their assailant. So the women that come, you want a perfect victim, comes forward right away, tells everybody,
Right.
preferably police, goes to all of those things. And that when that happens, it's more often in the case of a stranger assault. When you're assaulted by someone you don't, the brain tries to normalize it. So you minimize it, you blame yourself, you don't come forward right away. In fact, the ways that victims behave in court and following an assault are completely in keeping with how that trauma by someone affects you. And don't forget, that person is messing with your head, right? At the entire time. You've been groomed, you've been assaulted, and now they're messing with your head so you behave a certain way that people won't believe you. That is the entire modus operandi of the predator. But Andrea, you can speak to that because it was your story.
Yeah, I think, for me, didn't really like, what was most important for me, it was really just about to start to have my healing path. And I think that was the most important thing for me. It's why I decided to go back to trial after 10, 12 years. So it really was about starting my healing journey. And you know, that was the whole point of everything. I didn't go in with an expectation to get convictions, although I was hoping for one. But my expectation was just to further my healing path along. And I didn't look at those percentages just the same way I didn't look at percentages when I was an athlete going into games. I mean, we did, but it wasn't the most important thing. It was just about having faith. And it was just about having faith.
Go ahead. Sorry.
It's just about having faith and having and believing. And of course,
talk about why it took a year for you to tell anyone, because that's, I think, what speaks to when it's someone you know and not a stranger. It took you a year to you sat on the information. You didn't tell anyone, including your family, for a year. Why do you think that was?
That's just because you're you know, the typical kind of like victim things. You're ashamed, you're scared. I mean, he was a very powerful person in the community. You know, he was on the board at Temple. Who would believe me? So I think all those things really just that are fear-based things that creep in your head. That was really what it was about for me. I was just sitting in shame, and that's really where you don't want to be when you're starting your healing path.
Well, it's remarkable to me, Andrea, that you did share, based on what I'm hearing in our conversation right now, based on what I know previously to seeing the film, and based on what came out in the film. I mean, you know, and Gabor talks about the repression of this kind of trauma manifesting itself in so many other ways. And it seems to me, I mean, aren't we all waiting for that kind of breakthrough from a medical perspective and a physiological perspective? Mind and body are connected, you know, big surprise.
Yeah. Mind, body, and spirit are all connected. I mean, you can't be a whole person. What I say is it's mind, body, spirit. You got to have all those three things, and those are a part of healing. If you want to become a whole person again, they're all interconnected. Yeah.
Andrea,
probably a good point to point out that a lot of the women in that group suffered for years with various autoimmune diseases, physical effects. And, you know, Gabor is the first one to say it's now accepted. And his books are fantastic. You know, his book, When the Body Says No, is amazing in terms of how our emotional health affects our physical health. And the moment we start to embrace that, you can change the game. So I think it was evident in our group, and it's definitely evident, and the science is in on trauma and how it affects the body physically. So I would urge anyone to read his books if you want to know more.
It's amazing. I'm so glad you mentioned that, Karen. Andrea, we're probably going to have to wrap in a couple of minutes, but are you familiar at all with this notion of the way of our being and the truth of our being? It's something that I've been introduced to in the last little while, kind of philosophical principle, but at the same time, it's about where we actually speak from. And I think, isn't that what Gabor was trying to get to? And I wonder, you know, that kind of, I am not worthy, I'm not valuable, I'm not, I'm not lovely, I'm not accepted, all those, I mean, that's something I can really relate to. I can't relate to your story in the specifics, but that guilt and that shame and those I am nots, you know? Yeah.
Authentic self.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah,
so,
you froze there a second.
So I think, you know, those are interesting things, like the way and the truth. I think authenticity, what I'm feeling is that authenticity. In order to truly heal, you have got to get to your authentic self, what's in your heart, because your authenticity is your truth. But abuse and trauma and sexual violence takes us away from that. It takes us away from our truth, our authenticity. And I think as I sit here today, that's where I'm coming from. I'm coming from an authentic place, and I'm just blessed to have had the healing journey that I have had and to have this film. It was very healing for me.
Karen, would you describe yourself as more of a hopeful storyteller post this film? Would you have ever described yourself as a cynical storyteller?
No, for me, it's just about truth and about survival and about it wasn't. I'm always hopeful. There's always a way through, and it's sort of like, if I were going to study medicine, I'd study the miraculous remissions to see what they would be about. That would be where I'd go. But for this story, it was there is a lot of hope, and there is in terms of taking yourself out of the position of being a victim and taking command over your life and standing in sovereignty, for me, was the story, and giving that example to many people who don't see a way out or through. And if you look at, people who survive unimaginable things, and there are people who are taken down by it, and there are people who are able to transform into something much greater. And for me, it's the finding of what that is and where that path is that takes you through. Although the drive is to reveal and wake up an audience to a bigger understanding of what's going on, the hope for me is just like, it's available to, I'll give you one of the greatest things Gabor ever said to me that taught me the most. And it was when we were just talking, but I asked him when he forgave himself as a parent, because he writes a lot about his early fathering. And he said when he began to believe that healing was available for him, and that started to happen, which wasn't until his 70s, by the way, he then understood that healing was available for his children, and he let go of blaming himself. And the same is true, I believe, for everyone. No matter what you've experienced, there's healing available, and finding your way onto that path is really what we wanted to showcase in this film, so that people would have hope that no matter what they'd experience, there was a way forward. And so it's not really a cynical storyteller. I'm more of a, finding the inspiration in all things dark, because there are many, many things dark that we face in our lives and in our culture and with each other. And shining a light on a way forward, I think, is probably where I like to
Karen, I've always loved that notion, Diane Ackerman's notion, the purpose of art is to shine light in the darkness. And isn't that what, I guess, hopefully this conversation is a part of that, as well. Probably going to have to wrap it up. Andrea, a quick question. It's not a quick question. None of these are quick questions. That's how absurd. How do you speak to a young group of survivors and say, okay, I know you're out there balancing the fear and the risk. You need to step in. I would imagine everyone needs to do it in their own way. Everyone's story is different, etc. Do you know where I'm going with this? There's no simple answer, but I'd love to hear a little bit about is there a specific tool or two that listeners could take away?
Yeah, I would just say, it's really about providing a safe space. And that's what we do at the foundation with our healing circles. It's what people really need to feel. What they need to hear is you are safe. You are accepted. You are not alone. And thank you for telling me, and thank you for having the courage to speak and to, so that's where it comes from. It's just about providing a safe space. And you are courageous. You are safe, and you're not alone. That's it.
You're not alone.
We're not what happens to us.
Yeah.
What happens to us is only what happens to us. We are in control of how we respond to what happens to us. And that choice is ours to make every day. And even though you've made the same choice for years, you can make a different choice today.
Wow, it's a film everyone needs to see. It's a story that everyone needs to hear. I think everybody needs to become a part of one of those healing circles. I think somehow we need to get Gabor doing
I
like
agree.
larger circles, maybe in like
I agree.
squares around the world.
I agree.
It's kind of a ridiculous notion in some ways, but maybe not so much in others. I mean, who
Yeah.
doesn't need a good bit of therapy? And really, isn't therapy about, to your point, Andrea, isn't it about feeling safe? You can get therapy across the dinner table, it seems to me, in the right group community and with the right people. And I so love, Andrea, I just, faith and hope and acceptance are really the story you're telling here, which is just, it's brilliant and it's beautiful. And thank you for having that faith and that hope. And for those of you who want to see the film, January 8th, 2023, can you believe it? We're into the new year on CBC. If you don't catch it at 8 p.m., I believe that's Eastern Standard Time. Karen, correct me if I get this
Yes.
wrong. You can also get to see
Yes.
it, or you would be able to see it on CBC Gem. And again, just before we say goodbye, survivors.org and hopehealing.ca. Karen, last question. Is it a different film than you expected?
No, but it over delivered what I dreamed.
Oh, that's great.
And
That's fantastic.
And I think that was, Andrea and I spoke from the very beginning, and she was on board with where I wanted it to go, and it over delivered what I dreamed. So
amazing.
great.
Well, you can't ask for much more than that, it seems to me.
No.
Isn't that a beautiful thing? Well, thank you so much for taking the time today to chat about a difficult but important film. It is The Case Against Cosby. You can see it on CBC. And we've been chatting today here on Face to Face with Andrea Constant and Karen Wuki. Thanks so much for your time today.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Well, there you have it. That was Karen Wuki and Andrea Constant, and we had a conversation about their new film, The Case Against Cosby. We covered a lot of ground. Thank you for staying with us and for listening in. It really was an honor and a privilege to have this conversation with Andrea and Karen, and so looking forward to what's next for Karen as well as a filmmaker and a storyteller. Stay tuned on that. Survivors.org, hopehealing.ca. You can find out more about the work that's going on alongside of survivors in a variety of contexts. And don't forget davidpecklive.com for more information about what I do, about my speaking and my podcasting. And also you can get a copy of Real Change is Incremental there if you are so inclined. Please subscribe to us wherever you listen to podcasts, and leave us a review. Give us a thumbs up on YouTube if that's where you're listening and or watching, and we'd love it if you left us a review on Spotify or iTunes. That would be brilliant. And then if you wouldn't mind socially mediating the heck out of this channel and face-to-face, that would be brilliant. Thanks so much for listening in. My name's David Pack, and this is Face to Face.